Before the birth of the oldest city in America, Florida witnessed the clash of two nations for control and claim of the state. The result of the incident was the founding of St. Augustine by the Spanish.
Like many people, I found that the story of the French massacre that happened here in this area almost, well, over 400 years ago, well, it's a very intriguing story.
June 1564. René de Laudonnière led a group of 3 ships with 300 people. Most were French Huguenots or Protestants escaping Catholic persecution. They landed at the mouth of the St. Johns River and established Fort de la Caroline. By August of 1565, Fort Caroline was in much need of food and provisions. Many of the inhabitants, including their leader, Laudonnière, were ready to sail back to France. But Jean Ribault arrived with fresh supplies and 7 ships carrying 600 passengers, including women and children. Meanwhile, Spain had gotten word of the French presence in La Florida. So King Philip II dispatched Pedro Menendez to remove the French threat and settle a colony. Menendez established St. Augustine as his base of operations, thus founding the oldest city. Tensions were high and both parties knew a confrontation was coming. September 10th, 1565. Ribault had planned to sail and attack the Spanish at St. Augustine, but his timing was off. For at the time a hurricane hit and wrecked Ribault and the French fleet along the coast of Florida. September 20th, 1565. Menendez saw this as an opportunity to capture Fort Caroline. So the Spanish marched for 3 days in the rain until they reached the unsuspecting French fort. All the guards had gone to bed fearing no attack due to the storm. 152 were killed and 52 were spared. Only 26 escaped and returned to France. Among them was their leader, Laudonnière. Upon his return to St. Augustine, Pedro Menendez learned from local Indians that a group of white men were marching along the coast. Knowing it must be the shipwrecked Frenchmen, Menendez took 70 soldiers and marched south to see 127 French halted by a deep inlet. September 29th, 1565. Menendez confronts the French soldiers from the opposite side of the inlet. He tells them of the capture of Fort Caroline. The French, tired and hungry, and hearing of their home fort captured, surrendered. They were brought across the inlet 10 at a time. They were given food, and then their hands were bound behind them. Menendez drew a line in the sand 200 feet down the beach. The captured French were prepared to march. At the mark, the Spaniards executed 111 of the French captives, sparing only 16 of them who professed to be Catholic. October 12, 1565. A few weeks after the incident, Menendez met up with Ribault and 150 of his men at the same inlet. Ribault saw for himself the decaying corpses of the massacre and asked for mercy from the Spanish. They were brought across 10 at a time, and that day 134 more Frenchmen, including Jean Ribault himself, fell victim to the Spanish. Again, 16 were spared. It is said that Ribault's beard and a piece of his skin were sent to Philip II, and his head was cut into 4 parts, penetrated by a lance, and raised at each corner of the Spanish fort in St. Augustine. These horrific incidents gave the inlet its name, Matanzas, the Spanish word for slaughters. It would be more than 200 years before the Spanish would erect a fort to guard the inlet. The incident would not be forgotten.
The French had come down, and it was right after Menendez had discovered this area, and we did not want the French in this area, so they destroyed them.
Oh, we killed them then, we'll kill them again.
There's actually 2. It's 2 separate events, because Ribault actually saw the results of the first massacre, and he still came across with the help of the Spanish. Once he got over here, put him to the knife.
We do have a marker along our nature trail. In fact, that area where that marker is put, very likely that was at the very edge, or maybe even inside the inlet that existed there in 1565. But we must remember too, although that seems like a gruesome story, a gruesome thing to happen, and it's perhaps doesn't say too much for Florida history that the first time 2 European nations meet here in Florida, it resulted in this slaughter. Spanish were in fact outnumbered. There would have been no way to guard them, no way to house them if they had been brought back to St. Augustine, and most important, there certainly would have been no way to feed those 250 extra people. So Menendez was doing what he felt he needed to do to preserve his own people here in the land of La Florida.